Hi everyone and welcome to this new Masterclass by OpenUp. My name is Romee and at OpenUp we're on a mission to make mental well-being accessible to all. As a part of this mission, we host a masterclass every month about a topic that comes up a lot in conversations with our psychologist or that is very present in society. Today, we are going to be talking about neurodiversity in the workplace. For this masterclass, we invited the expert on this topic, Saskia Schepers, who is also the author of the best-selling book, When All Minds Thrive. At the end of the session, we will also be giving away a signed copy of this, so stay tuned for more information about that. Before we start, some practicalities. This is a live event, which means that you can interact with us. You can do so in the chat session, in the chat that you see on the right side. You can also reply with emojis, and there's also a little question mark at the bottom. If you have specific questions for Saskia, you can leave them there, and at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A where we will answer the most popular questions that you guys have been asking. That's it for me. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Saskia, and I hope you enjoy this masterclass. On to you.
Thank you. Yes, let's talk neurodiversity. All right. The next 30 or 35 minutes, we'll talk about neurodiversity in 3 principles. Neurodiversity in a nutshell, a peek inside less common brains, and a brain-friendly work floor. I created this agenda for the people who are more structured than I am. I never use an agenda. I'm a storyteller, so we'll get there. But this is what its topic is about. I add something that more people of you are comfortable listening to me. So, let's have it. Neurodiversity is nothing but a natural variation in brain, mind, and wiring. There is no such thing as a standard brain. We do think so that there are normal brains and abnormal brains, but it's not like that. Neurodiversity is like biodiversity. That's why I always start with this beautiful bouquet of flowers. You know, they all have their added value, and nobody of you will say a rose is a tulip with a disorder. Doesn't make any sense, you know? They're all beautiful in their own way. And this is how we should perceive brain variety. Brains are different, and that's a natural variety. But that said, we do see that there are more common brains and less common brains. A common societal norm in behaving, thinking, learning, communicating, a common way of thinking, that's what we say is neurotypical. Neurodivergent, a less common way of thinking and learning and processing info, is neurodivergent is different than the norm, whatever the norm may be. So you can see 1 out of 5 neurodivergent brains, and this is on average. You will see that in a more technical environment or a creative environment, this percentage will be much higher because certain brains look for certain environments. And I usually say, when it comes to neurodivergency, differently wired, because one thing is sure that neurodivergent colleagues, they have been feeling different their entire lives, growing up as a differently wired child. All right, so 1 out of 5 on average. And what does less common look like? It could be dyslexia or autism, giftedness, dyscalculia, synesthesia, Tourette, ADHD, bipolar, high sensitive, tens of brain varieties that we consider neurodivergent. And these are the most common ones, except one, synesthesia. That's why I added that brain variety. Because if I would have started with autism, you might be thinking, oh, I have an autistic nephew. I know exactly what that's like. But the variety within these brain types is as great as within all people. So it's tricky to start with something that might be surrounded by a lot of stigma because of the media, TV, anything. So let's start with something that doesn't ring a bell. Synesthesia is a remarkable combination of sensory experiences. People who can hear shapes or taste color, or they see color with its letters, you know, and all the text you produce in your company will read like a rainbow. Isn't that fascinating? A lot of artists have synesthesia, like Kandinsky, a lot of composers like Franz Liszt and Tori Amos, and a lot of physicians. Because people with synesthesia, they can imagine more unimaginable things. And that's something that's really interesting, right? And I ask you to listen to the rest of the story with the same kind of fascination. How does this brain work? because synesthesia is just another variety like ADHD or dyslexia. And talking about dyslexia, Richard Branson, a famous entrepreneur, he says, I owe my success to dyslexia, not despite dyslexia. And because of him, you can add dyslexic thinking as a skill to your LinkedIn profile. That's not a learning disorder. That's a great way of thinking and a unique added value to you as a company. Dyslexic people are the problem-solving machines in your organization. Another important thing to understand that neurodivergency remains standing in evolution. We still have autistic brains with ADHD. We have all kind of brain variety. We still do. It had a lot of time to grow out of the gene pool, right? But it didn't. So probably these brains have added value for us as a human species. And it does. Way back, autistic people were the people who could see when it comes to leaves and plants, if it's an edible plant or a poisonous plant. You know, this kind of eye for detail is needed to see these kind of differences. And in these times, autistic brains, they work at radiotherapy in hospitals or anti-money laundering within banks because of their pattern recognition and their eye for detail. When it comes to ADHD, people with ADHD were the hunters and gatherers. They would seek food and shelter. We perceive these brains as easily distracted, but you could also perceive it as hyper alert. That's why they work at intensive care, or they might end up working at the police station, or in, when it comes to movies, directors who can change quickly in their focus. So these brains are here for a reason. And this is what we call in neurodivergency collective intelligence. We need all brains. You don't always know when you're going to need what kind of brain, but we need those. And in neurodiversity, we call brain for specific brain types cognitive specializations. And that's so much different than disorder. What if this brain is not broken, but is supposed to be like that? And we just need to find the situation and the context in which this brain can thrive. I wish it was like that, but it's not like that. But we should perceive it as collective intelligence. All your colleagues see something else than you. We need all kind of brains. So let's see what we can do to make that happen. Because the reality is different. The reality is that brain variety often gets labeled. A medical label is a sort of disqualification. We need to do something about this brain to make it whole again. And it's surrounded by a lot of stigma, like autism. If you are my age, the first encounter with autism was the movie Rain Man. And that's still hurtful for a lot of autistic brains because they're not like that. The second one is microaggression. You should understand that your neurodivergent colleagues grew up as neurodivergent children. And they grew up with a constant stream of negative feedback. Just sit still. Behave for one time. Just do it. Try harder. Things like that. Or, I wish you were more like your sister. Which means I wish you were another child. And that does something to your identity growing up. We know from children with ADHD, before the age of 10, they get 20,000 more negative comments than other children. Think about that. What that means when you are perceived in such a way and they become your colleagues and they might hear the same things. Just shut up, sit still, behave, just come along for one drink. Things like that. That's what we call microaggression. The third one is the mismatch with the organization. All your processes, recruitment, talent development, leadership profiles, the systems you work in, they're all designed for the majority of the people, neurotypical people. So the system doesn't always suit them. And we have something that's called a diversity paradox. We surround ourselves by the people who are like us. When we say, I feel a connection with this kind of person, for example, in the recruitment process, in a job interview, connection is sometimes just you are a bit like me or you are like me. So connection is actually harmful when it comes to diversity because we surround ourselves with the same people. So we need to try hard to make it more inclusive because that's not the natural way of going. What do neurodivergent people say where the system doesn't suit them? These are actually quotes that people tell me. The office where I work is a sensory hell because of the lights, people chattering, eating apples, things like that. These are all kinds of energy drains and it adds up. You will be tired by noon. These people were probably really relieved working from home during the pandemic. And that's why this topic got momentum, because then we found out everybody responds differently in the same situation. And the second one of my favorites, the surprise outing. We're going to have an event in 3 weeks. It'll be fun. We're not going to tell anything, but it'll be fun for everybody. Well, you don't know that. And for some people, these kind of surprise acts, they cause a lot of stress. Maybe they can't even sleep. They need to know, where is it? Can I get there by public transport? Can I leave early? Never organize something on a boat, really. So they need a lot more context to be comfortable at an event or a party like that. And maybe this is a big thing, but it could also be something like an appointment that spontaneously appears in your calendar. Like, oh, I saw a spot on 2:00, so I put something in your calendar. We need to talk. We need to talk is like a bomb going off in a neurodivergent brain because they are prepared for negative feedback. So they might think, oh my God, now I'm going to get fired. Or she was looking at me in a weird way anyway. So now it's coming. So be gentle and always give more context. And the third one is the meetings. Maybe you are somebody who often don't see the point attending a meeting. Maybe you shouldn't be there at all, not having any added value, or sometimes just 20% of the meeting is actually interesting for you. But, it's never an option to come only for 10 minutes, probably. So do I need to be here is a very important question. When it comes to obstacles at work, it didn't matter what kind of person I spoke to when it comes to where the system don't suit them. Whether they're gifted or dyslexic, whatever, people say the same things. They say things about inconsistency, that we agree on something, but there are a lot of situations that we act differently. Some brains are designed for consistency, so they're not that flexible to think in exceptions. They might be stressing out. Too little context. Those are the people when there's like a change in the company, will start to ask a lot of questions. And colleagues might think, just start, we'll see it along the way, things like that. But some people need way more information to be comfortable in, especially in times of change. Hidden agendas, political behavior, nice projects, the cool jobs don't always go to the people who deserve best, right? Because sometimes people know each other. And within this group of people, there's usually a high sense of righteousness. So if things are not going fair, it'll eat them up alive from the inside. Procedures and work processes. Yeah, I don't know how your job is organized, but I used to work Agile Scrum, and I used to have to enter all my work and projects into Jira, which is a system that's so highly detailed. It was like a brain freeze for my brain. We are not all designed to work in a specific kind of way. So maybe you recognize this one. Too many meetings. We increased working together in project groups and meetings with 50% the last 20 years. Can imagine. And the problem is not that people don't want to collaborate, but you spend a lot of time together. There's just too little time to spend alone. And maybe you are the person who is more introverted, or you just need more time to process information or anything like that. So it's hurtful for brains when they just don't have enough time alone. Team events. Not everybody enjoys being in a group. Some people of you like to connect one-on-one. Maybe more on the content of the job. And that's not less social, it's differently social. And the office layout, that's an obvious one when it comes to noise or smells or whatever. We know from research that 50% of working neurodivergents suffer from all these kind of energy leaks. And this ends up, in mental pressure or even burnout symptoms. That's a lot. That's 1 out of 10 colleagues on average. Why don't we know this? Why has this become such a big topic? Because people mask. I've been asked this a lot. You know, Saskia, this is a professional organization. People can adapt, can they? Well, they can. These people have been adapting their entire lives. As a child, you will do whatever it takes to fit into the group. So, you know, you don't always get the needs, like maybe sometimes spending alone or things like that. You will do whatever it takes to fit into the group. And they will also do this as an adult. Being in 3 meetings in a row, for some people, that's just, you know, a big energy drain. Well, I think for most people, it's an energy drain. But then again, some people mask to do whatever it takes to make it work at work, but they will pay the price at home. And that's why we don't see this. During the day, they will do what it takes, paying the price from home. And mask. And this is a beautiful quote from Simon Sinek, the management guru. He has ADHD, he's open about it, and this is what he says. May we all discover what about us doesn't fit the norm, whatever that may be, and instead of trying to hide it or bury it, work to make that our single greatest advantage. Where you don't fit in is actually your added value. Look at it like that. Let's have a peek inside less common brains. Why is it that they don't fit into the norm? Because, you know, we are all good at stuff and bad at other stuff. We all have these kind of flows in our competencies. But neurodivergent brains have what we say a spiky profile. Peaks upward and peaks downward. And there's such, you know, a wide range when it comes to competencies. And the problem is that you get feedback on the lower half of your profile. I've been having the same interview when it comes to performance. 25 years, the same interview. It was like, Saskia, you are so creative and you lead big projects and you come up with all these kind of cool ideas. But, and then we had it, you know, all kind of things that I had to improve to get another job or get a promotion or whatever. Spend more time, drink a coffee with colleagues or be more active in meetings, but it went too slow, so didn't really work out. And maybe you put some effort in it and it will increase a bit. But when it's not your natural way of being, it won't really improve that much. And this is a beautiful profile, a dyslexic profile. Look at this. It's a profile that's really resourceful. 3D thinkers and a helicopter view. And they are very resourceful because when you are a child and you don't know how to spell a word, you'll come up with another one. Or you will rewrite the sentence. You'll do whatever it takes to make it work. So trained in seeking solutions and alternatives. Those are your colleagues. Problem-solving machines. But it comes along with bad spelling, sometimes a bad sense of time, and bad at creating structure. And it's such a shame that we have to spend all our time to increase the things that we're actually not wired for. And all this time you could spend at the things that you are wired for, the upper half. And this is, yes, a bit of a hysterical slide, but these are examples of neurodivergent spiky profiles. People who have an enormous eye for detail and being persistent and systematic, the inventors. That might comes along with inflexibility, socially inadequate, not reading all the cues, or sensory overload. We might perceive this brain as an autistic brain. It doesn't have to be like that. It's that kind of brain profile. Next to that one, could be perceived as an ADHD brain, hyper-focused, unexpected connections, and action-oriented. The hunters and gatherers might be perceived as chaotic, impulsive, or easily distracted. That's an interesting one. Hyper-focused and easily distracted, you see? Because when they are interested, they can focus like nobody else. Then the left lower corner could be high-sensitive, intuitive, reflective, and caring. Like up to 60% of nurses are high-sensitive. Comes along with sensory overload, ruminating, overthinking, and setting your own boundaries. When you feel a lot from people around you, you're sensitive to that, it's hard to not act on it. And sometimes you cross your own boundaries. And the last one could be giftedness, overseeing complexity, connecting the dots, and there is no box. People who think in parallel universes are inimitable for their colleagues. They might be easily bored or too direct. Maybe these are the kind of people who will start on Monday saying, all right, coming back to the project on Friday, I had some ideas, blah, blah, blah. And they will hear, okay, good morning to you too. How was your weekend? Be gentle. That's not a lack of interest. It's just differently wired. There's nothing about low functioning or high functioning when it comes to autism, for example. It has a lot of sliders. Each person is different. So you should perceive brain variety in brain profiles. Some people have certain peak upwards and they will come along with peak downwards. So just look for brain profiles with their unique strengths and seek the right context because it has added value. It adds value to the collective intelligence. You should know that neurodivergent talent, of course, it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of acting and behavior, but it's also being different. That's why all the negative comments on the lower half of your spiky profile is perceived in such a hurtful way. Colleagues might think they give feedback on behavior, but it's felt as criticism on their identity, on who they are. But in the end, we are all a genius. We are all talented. But it's a famous quote: if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will grow up feeling inadequate or feeling stupid. And that's what starts in schools. The only thing that we can measure at this moment is math and language. If you are good at math and language, you are considered intelligent. If that's not your thing, then you might have a different route in the education system. But there are so many more ways of being smart. It's such a shame that we disqualify a lot of children who are brilliant in stuff, but not always math and language. So what can you do to create a more brain-friendly work floor together if you know there are a lot of colleagues who have been perceived in such a negative way, who have unique talents, but are not always feel free to speak up about what they need to thrive? That's something that we can do together. And what neurodivergent people say, what is the best thing that you can do as a colleague or as an organization, is of course the space and workplace. Maybe when they are sensitive to stimuli, an environment where they can concentrate. And of course, things like assistant tech, like text-to-speech software. But the majority will say the attitude of others, how other people respond to your needs or to who you are or how you work. And I have this example of a guy with ADHD. He spoke up to his manager about having ADHD. And then the manager said, okay, you have ADHD. What are you going to do so it doesn't bother me? Wow. This manager could also have been saying things like, okay, tell me more. Think about synesthesia. How does this brain work? Tell me more. What does it mean, ADHD, for you? What do I need to know as a manager? What do you want colleagues to know about this? Do you know what you need? How can we make it work? How can I get the best out of your brain, knowing that this brain can do things that other people can't? This is such a different way of responding to people. And believe me, this could be such a game changer. You could be the first one to respond in a positive way to people who have been hearing negative things their entire lives. So we need to create a social and psychological safe space where people feel free to speak up. And social safety is about no microaggression. Things like, we're all a bit autistic, That's really hurtful for autistic brains. We are not all a bit autistic. So be careful with things like that. Maybe you don't have bad intentions, but it won't be perceived well by the other person. Make sure that core values are explicit, that what you say you are on the website, that it's actually what you feel around when you are in the organization, and that good behavior pays off, the right intentions. Psychological safety is something that you create within a team, an active policy on diversity and inclusion, because otherwise it will get more homogeneous because of the diversity paradox. Make sure that every voice counts and make room for opposing voices. Deep democracy is way deeper than democracy. Most of the time it's like, when 8 out of 10 people say A and 2 out of 10 people say B, it's A, the decision is made. But knowing about neurodiversity and a collective intelligence, what do those two people see, what other people might overlook? So then what you best can do is ask these people, what do they see? And seeking for the wisdom in the position of the minority. So you can add this wisdom to the decision of the majority. That's collective intelligence. And something you can do right away when people have, it seems like everybody has the same opinion and one people speaks up and says, well, I see it in a different way. Don't ask who agrees with this person, but always ask who recognizes something in this other voice. Because you are never the only one that sees something, but you might be the first one. And if you ask a thing like this, what do you recognize? More people will speak up and say, yeah, that's a valid point. Maybe that's something that we should take into account. We need to be curious about how our brain works and the brains of our colleagues. And what you can do with each other is fill in the brain manual, which I created, and you can see and check it out in the handout. And maybe you can fill it in for yourself or within your team, because it's very beneficial to know what other people need to be their best selves. If they are their best selves, you are the best team. And in this brain manual, you will see these 5 factors where we are all different. That's not only neurodivergency, that's everybody. Because in the end, we are all wired in a different way. We are all different when it comes to the degree of stimuli that we enjoy or moving around, things like that. We're all different. When it comes to the degree of structuring, some need an agenda up front or meeting documents up front to be comfortable in the meeting. They need this and other people don't. The degree of sociability, I can't stress it enough. Some people rather be one-on-one, have one-on-one context than in a group, and that's just differently social. Work rhythm, some of you peak in the morning, some of you in the afternoon, and if you have all your meetings on your productive hours, that's such a shame. So be active on it, that you can work in the best way you can. And a degree of guidance, some of you, they don't need anything to get started. But other might be people with ADHD. If you say something like, I need this from you somewhere next week. Somewhere next week. What does that mean? Is that Wednesday? Is Friday afternoon still somewhere next week? What did she say anyhow? They need more context and need more guidance. Like, this is what I need. You will write this for these kind of people, 1,500 words, hand it over Wednesday at 2. Thank you. That's an external deadline and they need it. And that's not willingness or IQ or whatever. It's just a differently wired brain that needs more context to thrive. And this is a dialogue between colleagues or between a manager and an employee. It's something that we can do together. And when we know our brain preferences, we can find the right context in which all brains can thrive. And the context is important because you can see here a cactus, rhododendron, and water lilies. They thrive in their own environment. And if I take the cactus out of the desert and will put it in the forest next to the rhododendron, it will die. And you can't say to the cactus, then you should have tried harder. That doesn't make any sense, but we do so. We change the context and then disqualify people. Since the post-industrial revolution, we are all sitting at a chair and most of you in an office. If you are not designed for that, anyhow, you can get the label ADHD or disorder, attention disorder. If you can't sit still, then you are in trouble in these kind of times. So we change the context by sitting still, increasing the amount of stimuli. Then more people, more brains will get into trouble. So always look for the right context. And what you can do as a company to make it more inclusive for everybody is what we in neurodiversity call reasonable adjustments. But I changed it into reasonable additions because I don't do something for 1 or 2 people. When I change something, it's not for a few people. It's an addition as a choice for everybody because this is what we know. Whatever you do to make it more comfortable for neurodivergent people, it will be beneficial for all the employees in the company. And additions like this one, a left-handed scissors for left-handed people. If we are starting to cut something, then people who are left-handed somehow have a handicap when the right scissors are not a hand. So you add something. And you can add something when it comes to flexibility. Flexibility in work hours or breaks, side activities for people who just need more things at one time. Flexibility on deadlines or adjustable speed clips. Some people just need to speed up to to get there, to stay focused. It could also be more choice when it comes to calling or video calling, because video calling is the new normal. But some of you need to move around to be able to think, so you rather have a telephone call. The order of tasks, listening or reading to information, a stimuli-free zone at an event that you don't have to end up in the loo when you need time for your own thoughts, and explicitly value neurodivergent talent. If we don't measure it, you can't thrive in it. So usually it's planning, organization, result-driven, things like that, but not like things like pattern recognition, alert brain, or creativity. If we don't measure it, you can't thrive with it. And the last one, more information, photos of a location up front. Some of you are really nervous going to a new location. Then it's very helpful that you have a picture of the building or exactly written down how you get there. Meeting documents up front, told you that one. Audiovisual support. And if you do want to have a surprise party, add a spoiler QR for those people who just need more context to be comfortable. All kind of things that you can add, which will be beneficial for way more people. And when it comes to reasonable additions, what I see in teams a lot is that people say, well, if Tim gets an extra day working from home, I want it. We don't see that we are all different. Some managers say, I want to treat all my employees equal because that's fair, but we are not all equal. But, we should have the same opportunity. So if it's always ask if this is a privilege, what I'm adding for somebody, or is it a box that somebody needs to have the same starting point and the same opportunities to thrive in their jobs. Usually it's not a privilege, but it might be perceived in a way like that by colleagues. And I will show you some examples of reasonable additions. Look at this one. Isn't it far easier to read when it's more infographic-like contract, like the right one, This is called visual contract. You actually have companies who do this. It has the same legal value. This one, workplace revolutionary. If you put something into a calendar of a colleague, quick chat, good thing, more context. Or the 6-second rule, what you can do right away. If you are in a meeting and somebody asks a question, be quiet for 6 seconds or more, because there are people in the room who need to process that question. And once they have processed that question, they will have more added value than when we go right away with all the things that pop up in the more extrovert kind of brains. So give room to think, because we need all brains. And what about this one? If you would go to an event and they had lanyards and you could choose, depending on your social battery, how you want to interact with people, I think that's a brilliant one. And I think if people know this, they will come easier because they know they have a choice. And I want to end up with examples like this. In a world where you can be anything, create more time alone for the people who need more time to process. A lot of brains will be very happy if there are less meetings or they are shorter. What you can do, wrapping up, the key takeaways, as I see it, are ensuring social and psychological safety. Explicitly ask for the minority point of view, because they might see things that we otherwise might overlook. Be curious, ask questions. What is it like to be you? And what do you need to be your best selves? And seek the right context when it comes to stimuli, structure, things like that. This is how you make feel people at home in your organization or in your team. And this is the one I'm going to end up with. Terence Lester is a writer, and I love this quote, because what he says is, you are all welcome is very different than saying, I thought about you. I thought about the people who are more structured than I am. I thought about the people who are sensitive to stimuli. And the beautiful example came from a mother. She talked about her son's school. They had a disco evening with a disco ball. It was just great. But they also had a room to play chess. Because what do you want? Do you want everybody on the dance floor? Because that's what fun looks like. Or do you want everybody to be able to connect in a way that suits them? That's being inclusive, and that's brain friendly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Saskia, for all of the knowledge, but also the practical examples of what we can do in the workplace. I really like that last quote as well. It also makes you feel very different if you just say like, oh, everyone's equal, or like, hey, I created this with you in mind. Like, it's a very different feeling as well when you say it like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's, it is so beneficial to just add a choice or whatever, because if there's one norm, it's hurtful. You won't feel at home when you act like that as a company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not everybody wants to sing karaoke with Christmas. I don't, but some do. And that's good, know. But
I do, but some don't.
Yeah. And if there are only, that's the problem. Sometimes there are only extroverted people in the party, the party commission. And then, you might end up with all these kind of fun things, but not fun for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really good advice. We got a lot of questions based on your talk, so let's dive into them. The most popular question was one that was asked by Kim, and she says, as a people manager, if a neurodivergent person, in this case ADHD, is not meeting the performance expectations for their job, what is generally the right course of action? Adjust the role expectations down, seek a different role for them, try and upskill them in the existing role, or other? What would you advise in this regard?
It could be something somebody who's really in the wrong context. I always advise to look at this person. What is this person's unique added value? What does this person bring to the team? Because that's what you want to evaluate, right? That's the added value.
Yeah.
And if that means that there's some things not working out well, because what are they measuring? If they're measuring planning an organization, being on time, I don't know, could be a problem. But what are you measuring? Are you measuring the peaks upward, or are you measuring the peaks downward? So that's the question when it comes to this person, because otherwise it won't work. It won't work if you maybe lower expectations. It should be, do you have the right expectations or the right qualities of this kind of person?
Yeah.
And I'm not like everybody, it's like, this is what I always say, it's neurodivergency is never an excuse, but the challenges are real. So we need to know about what is the price this person is paying for his talent. Because maybe we can take these hurdles away instead of lowering expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in this context, we don't, of course,
we don't know.
Lot,
but it is always interesting. But this is the call to every manager, but also every employee. It's not an excuse. It isn't. But the challenges are real. So this is the psychological safety that you respond in a positive way. Okay, I see you struggling. It's not like, can't you just? That's microaggression. It's okay. I get you. Let's talk about it. What do you need? Do you know what you need? That's a better question than what do you need? Because some people don't know what they need. So you know what you need. Let's take a look at when you do excel. In which projects do you excel? Maybe it's because you work with somebody who's very complementary to you. So maybe we should seek for more projects like that. Always seek for the peaks.
Yeah.
When is this person doing the best he can, or excels? Then find out what the circumstances are that are obviously helpful for this person.
Yeah.
So it's not lowering expectations.
Yeah.
That's, I think, even an assault for the neurodivergent people. No, they can excel, but maybe they're paying a price, and you should focus on that.
Yeah. So it's not about moving away from looking at it from a role perspective and looking from a person perspective.
Exactly.
And then seeing, do they even fit in this role, or do we need to adjust things within the role, and just basically viewing it from there. Okay. Yeah, that sounds, thank you for that answer. It sounds really good. Then we have the next question, which is by Nadia. And I really recognize myself in this, so I'm really happy that she's asking. She says, do you have tips and strategies how to deal with inconsistency in productivity levels? Personal example, I crush my to-do list 1 week, followed by a period of procrastinating, getting distracted easily, and trying to make up for it in the good weeks by working overtime. So I think this is a person who definitely recognizes the ups and downs.
But is it a problem? I don't know. Because some of people with ADHD, they need this dopamine, that they need this pressure to be their best selves. Because sometimes you are designed for, that's why a lot of people ADHD end up in the emergency room. You know, they need this, they need this thrills, this pressure to be their best selves. So this is actually self-medication to, you know, to let things come to the last moment and then excel, because that's actually what you're really good at. And I'm not sure, is she saying that it's a problem?
Well, she's saying that in the last week she's trying to make up for it in the good weeks by working overtime. So I think she is trying to compensate for the moments where she maybe is easily distracted. So I think that's a problem, might be there for her.
Well, you know, I know from other people with ADHD, the most important thing here is self-knowledge. Mm-hmm. That you know when, what you need to be your best self. And I spoke this, we should put this in the handout, because there's this brilliant guy, Jacek Ambrosiewicz, and he has a TED Talk. And I love him because this is what he talks about with ADHD, what he did to improve his life. And I think that's an answer to this question too. And he says self-knowledge is so important. And what he did was writing down every day how his day was working out. Mm-hmm. And he says at some point, I was always surprised that I was late for something. And I was always surprised that I was, I had lesser days when it was in autumn, the season things. And he says, by writing everything down and to create data about myself, I got more insight. Mm. And this helped him create a better work pattern, but also in his private life. Then he found out what he actually needed. Mm. And he was really fond of data, So maybe that's a good advice. Just look what's happening, why you're procrastinating, or what you are doing in your life. Yeah. Because maybe you will find out there's a pattern.
Yeah, I know also one of our psychologists actually also did that and did it with the team, where she basically created handouts of how they worked as a person, kind of like a manual about themselves of like, this is like how to deal with me under pressure. This is how I react in those ways. And then also for their own self-knowledge, basically to see like, oh, this is how I react to certain things. How can I prevent this or like work with it in a different way?
And gamification is always a good answer to, to having more fun. And I know about cleaning a room, just set the alarm clock for 10 minutes, go, and they have like a time pressure, create your own pressure. So you don't have to compensate in the weeks after that. Mm-hmm. So I think gamification, create your own pressure. That's why Duolingo is such a brilliant thing, because you don't want to miss your
streaks. Yeah.
So, think, oh no, I have to do this now because otherwise I will lose it. Yeah. And maybe that's something you can create for yourself, because you need to create your own deadline or your own pressure.
Just find out what works for you and create it in such a way that it works for you.
And be creative.
Yeah.
Because that's something you're designed for. So
it's probably something she's good at.
Yeah, but it takes one to know one. So people like Jacek and your psychologists have all these kind of knowledge. Mm-hmm. But I think self-knowledge is very important.
Yeah. Good one. We'll put the link in the chat to the talk, because I think it can help a lot of people. Then there is a next question from Madeleine, and she asks, I would like to hear about the leadership possibilities for neurodivergent people. The one day one might have all the energy and words to share the vision, and the next day one might be like peopled out. What are your thoughts on neurodivergence in leadership roles?
Yes, well, the most important thing which you can do for your neurodivergent community that we know is that people high in the company speak up about their neurodivergency, because they are there, but usually don't speak up. Mm-hmm. So it's for everybody should be so beneficial if we had our own role models, So this is also asking people to speak up when they're in a leadership role, because that's very important, because then you can learn from each other. Mm-hmm. But what I see is it's important, because we see that when the leadership is more neurodiverse, it's easier to hire neurodivergent people, because we surround ourselves by, So that's why it's very important for a company. But also this starts with self-knowledge. Do you know what you need? Mm-hmm. And do you know where your boundaries are? And do you have for yourself, also being an employee, have the right language to talk about what you need? Because you don't have to say, because of ADHD, I have trouble with this. It's not about labeling. It's about, I'm the kind of person who, also in this role, it's like, what do I need to be my best self? And can I ask that from my own manager? But seek the right language to speak up about how your brain works. You don't have to label it, but just from, if you want the best out of me as a leader, I'm not the kind of person who can go with a getaway for 3 days. You have these leadership weeks, right?
Yeah.
Be honest, that's not me, then I might come for only the mornings because that's then we have all the information and all the social stuff. I'm not designed for that, and maybe I'll choose one of those events. I don't know, but I think we need to create neutral language with each other, so you can speak up for yourself in a more neutral way.
Yeah,
but I don't know this person. I think we could talk for hours about this, but it starts with self-knowledge. Do you know exactly how your productivity peaks are during the week, how your social battery is during the week? Yeah. So you can be more constant, because that's what I think in the story, that it's also about a bit fluctuating in performance. Maybe that's something I hear in this story.
Yeah, I think it's also maybe also as a manager, if you're neurodivergent as a manager, it's also maybe about like communicating what you say, like finding the right words and communicating that to your team and saying hey, this is how I function.
Because I have a team within All My Thrive, and I think you can understand that I'm not the person who creates structure. Maybe so I'm very happy I have agendas sometimes. But so I say to people, if you want to work with me, I'm not the one who will create structure for you. Yeah. So maybe you are a cactus in the forest when you work with me, then you shouldn't do it. Are you able to create your own structure? Or we have colleagues who create structure, then you should work with that one. Yeah. So I know I'm not the one who can do that. So that's why you need this self-knowledge, that you can tell other people, this is something I'm not able to provide. So how can we handle that? Because if you are neurodivergent, you might have preferences that don't always meet the preferences of your team. If you have ADHD and you have people who need way more structure and context, that might not work out if you talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so being very clear on, hey, this is what I can offer, and this is maybe what I can't offer, but I'm willing to help you also in finding that somewhere else, or finding someone else who can help you with providing structure, helping you in that way, basically.
Yeah, and it's not about labeling, it's about, that's why I always honest about that. If you're the person who needs way more structure, then we need to know how we're going to do that, because I'm not the one who's going to create it.
Yeah. That's a really good one. Yeah,
that's a good. So because if you are different, you have preferences that might not meet the expectations of your team.
Yeah.
So I can't stress it enough. Fill it in, a brain manual. Have fun, talk about it, and understand why sometimes you really interact in a very good way, or sometimes, you drive each other crazy. I've been driving colleagues crazy because I couldn't give the structure they needed. Yeah. And you might ask again and again to provide more structure, but if it's not your thing, organize it.
Yeah, thank you so much for this answer. I think we could talk about this forever, but looking at the time, we only have time for one more question. So this will be the final one, which is one by Matthias, and he asks, what is your experience with ADHD in a context of software development, engineering, IT projects, agile teams, and as an engineering manager working with all these disciplines and areas in their teams? Do you have any tips, pros and cons, like specifically for this sector, engineering tech sector?
Yeah, that's difficult because ADHD has different slides. It's so complex that you can't say, if you have somebody with ADHD in your team, then you should this. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Because I actually work with people with ADHD who provide structure for me, so you just can't say, people AJ can't do this and can't do that, so they need that. So I don't have an answer to that, because it will be tricky. Yeah, because I would maybe stress stigma.
Yeah, or put people in a specific box.
Exactly. It's difficult, but so that's why we need curiosity. How does this work for you? Because some people with ADHD, they thrive on deadlines and they don't give structure, but other people do. So it's a tricky one to answer that one. I might do that one-on-one, but not.
So tuning in on basically the specific needs of the team members.
Yeah, and what I do is, because I actually did this in software development, these are often clients of ours because when there's a lot of IT involved, there's a lot of neurodivergency. That's just a fact. So we do a lot of trainings with teams, and then we get this out of the team. Then we keep things, people talk about what they need and where they are complementary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always show a picture of 2 staircases, a regular one and a 3D Escher house.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, okay, where do you recognize yourself in?
Mm-hmm.
And people pick sides. And that's just a brilliant way of talk about
to
neurodiversity. Okay, this is how you need. So do you need more structure? Or are you the right person when it comes to the beginning of the project? Or are you the person who finishes it? Or are you the person who can come up with all kind of solutions?
Yeah.
And that's a more neutral way. I keep stressing that, a more neutral way about talking about brain variety.
Yeah, so it's really about the variety, personalizing,
Yeah,
etc., normalizing the different types.
We need to get rid of the boxes. Oh, this guy have ADHD, so now I want a checklist of anything I can do to make it work for this guy. I wish we had it, but we don't.
It doesn't work like that. Yeah, Saskia, thank you so much for all of the information that you gave today. It was very insightful. For the people at home, there are handouts that you can download about the brain manual. You can click on apps and then handouts, and you can find them there so you can work on it yourself. We also have our psychologists ready if you want to speak one-on-one about maybe your neurodivergence, or you're working with someone neurodivergent and you have a very specific question. You can go to our website and go to the team, and then basically you can select any team that you might be interested in. Neurodiversity is one of them. So if you click that, you'll get a bunch of experts who are trained also to work with neurodivergent people and can help you also one-on-one. As a final note, like I said in the beginning, we're going to give a signed book of Saskia away. So if you would like to receive this book, please leave the word book in the chat, and we will collect all of the people who will put it in, select someone, and email you afterwards if you've won. So thank you, Saskia. Thank you everyone at home for watching. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you.